stay at WABAMC for 18 months before I could transfer. During that time, they had a new vaccine for meningitis come out. I decided to get Eric the vaccine to give him more protection. Once, when I picked Eric up from the daycare, I found out that one of the providers had taken him home with them at lunchtime. They asked me if I was okay with that. I told them no. I told them that by taking Eric off the premises, they weren't covered if anything should happen to him. I also worried about what if they didn't bring him back. I pulled CQ at the barracks several times. One time, my driver told me that he and his boyfriend had decided to get wedding rings the next day. They couldn't get married, but they were going to pledge themselves to each other. I told them I thought that was wonderful and wished them good luck. Some of the sergeants at the pediatric clinic wanted to learn to perform the rapid antigen test for strep A until I told them all of what I did. They didn't want to go to the microbiology laboratory because it stunk. Our company had to go to the range to qualify. I love going to the range. We went to the armory to sign out an M16. We went to the range by bus. Once we got there, we had to zero our weapon. I had a problem. Every time I tried to zero my weapon, I couldn't. I would aim and hit low or miss the target. I talked to the range sergeant. He asked for my weapon. I handed it over to him. I had 3 bullets left. He shot my weapon 3 times. He hit nothing. He pulled the magazine, looked into the chamber, making sure it was empty. He then looked down the chamber. He told me the weapon couldn't be zeroed. There was no swirl in the barrel of the weapon. I had to borrow someone else's rifle to qualify. We followed the range sergeant's instructions as he called them out. One sergeant didn't qualify because he just kept shooting at targets he missed. We were to shoot 1 bullet for each target. The targets were pop-up targets at different distances, 50 yards, 75 yards, 100 yards. The range sergeant would tell us when to shoot. I qualified as sharpshooter, which surprised me. We would shoot and hit the target. It might go down. Or we would miss, hit a rock, and the rock would hit the target and knock it down. The target's hinges were rusty and not dependable. About the time we found out about that time we found out Ed's dad, Don, had lung cancer. We took leave to see Ed's family in Tennessee. The 3 of us drove up to visit them. Ed's brother Kevin and his family were there too. Kevin was reassigned to Nashville as a recruiter. Kevin's oldest daughter, Erin, was a year older than Eric, and Ashley was just a baby. We took turns watching the kids so the other could get out of the house for a while. It was a tough time for all of us. We went back to Texas as my leave had ended. We had to fly back when Don was dying in the hospital. One day while visiting Don in the hospital, I asked Anita about giving him the last rites. We found out that originally Don was baptized Catholic. Anita called the Catholic chaplain and he came up to give Don the last rites. Don died shortly after that. We went with Anita to the funeral parlor. She decided to have Don cremated and his remains laid to rest with Tom Kay in Virginia. Anita had bought a puzzle box to put Don's ashes in. She later changed her mind and bought an urn. We returned to El Paso and worked. Anita and Kevin had to plan the services for Don and the placement of his ashes. We went up to the funeral services for Ed's dad. I met Ed's grandparents, Sidney and Eunice Jones, for the first time. His grandparents got to see their grandson, Eric, for the first time. There was a picture of us with Eric in his Bullfrog racing team jacket that they had bought for him on top of a TV. Eric saw the picture, got angry, and started yelling. He was upset because the baby in the picture was wearing his jacket. We hadn't brought the jacket with us. We tried to explain that he was in the picture, but he wouldn't stop crying. We had to turn the picture face down to calm him down. One day, Anita went with us to breakfast at the local Waffle House. Eric was getting bored, so I gave him some coffee creamer containers to play with. There was an elderly couple sitting at the next table. The next thing we knew, Eric squeezed the creamer container and squirted the elderly couple with the creamer. I was mortified. We apologized to the couple. They said they were grandparents and understood. The service was beautiful. When we got back to El Paso after the funeral, I talked to personnel about a transfer to another post. I loved my job, but I didn't like El Paso. We missed the trees and water and didn't like the desert. I was told there was only one opening in my MOS, and it was overseas. It was in Hawaii. I discussed it with Ed, and we decided that we would make the sacrifice and go to Hawaii. I called the personnel office and accepted the assignment. I had to sign an extension to reenlistment before I could get my transfer to Hawaii. I had lots to do, filling out paperwork, finding someone to train to replace me, getting airline tickets. I received my orders and discovered I would be working for clinical investigations at Triple Army Medical Center in Honolulu, Hawaii. I called military housing in Hawaii and tried to arrange on post housing. I almost got it too. When I mentioned we had a dog, I was told that dogs couldn't live in substandard housing. I was thinking, wait a minute, what? I was told we would have to live off post. I told Ed this when I got home. He had the same reaction as I did. We realized what she meant was pets weren't allowed in on post quarters. We discovered we had to find an airline that would allow our pet to come with us and pay for his transportation to Hawaii. Also, we would have to pay for M&M to be in quarantine for 6 months. Military-wide, there was a ceremony to change SP5 and SP6 rank to sergeant and staff sergeant. It was an interesting ceremony. All the SP5 and SP6 soldiers were called to formation, and the company commander read the proclamation making SP5 and SP6 soldiers sergeant and staff sergeant. There was a reception after the ceremony. I found an airline that would allow us to bring M&M with us. I went to the sergeant that handled tickets. I gave him the required number of orders. I told him what airline we were using and I needed 3 tickets to Honolulu for myself, my husband, and son. He told me to check back in 3 weeks. When 3 weeks had passed, I called the sergeant. He said the tickets were ready. I went to pick them up and he handed me my ticket. I asked him, where are the airplane tickets for my husband and son? He told me he couldn't give me tickets for them. He said they would have to fly there later because I didn't know where I was going to be stationed. I told him, yes, I do. I will be stationed at Triple Army Medical Center. It's in my orders. He looked at my orders for the first time since I gave them to him. He said, you're right. Your orders do say that. He then apologized to me. I told them I was needing the tickets fast so I could leave on time to report to duty in Oahu. We sold our cars so we didn't have to deal with shipping them. I was able to pick up the tickets for Ed and Eric in time for me to sign out of the base. We went to El Paso International Airport to catch our flight to Hawaii. We found our gate and had M&M loaded onto the airplane. We all boarded the airplane. Our circuitous route took us to Albuquerque International Airport in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where we had a 3-hour layover before we changed planes to fly to LAX Airport. Ed talked to the crew at the airport. He asked about seeing M&M before we changed planes. Ed wanted to check on M&M to see that he was all right, take him for a walk, and give him some water. They told Ed that the dog was fine and they would take care of him. We walked Eric around the terminal to kill time and to keep him from being bored. We ate and looked in different gift shops. Finally, we boarded the plane. We arrived at LAX Annex Terminal and left the plane. We were told we had a 5-hour layover. We were told that we could head to the main terminal to sightsee, but to get back on time. We decided to stay put. I was on travel orders and didn't want to miss the flight and be AWOL. Ed asked again to check on M&M and was told that he couldn't and that they would take care of M&M. Next thing we heard was a flight attendant saying they had lost M&M. Ed talked them to find out what was going on. Ed told them that if they didn't find our dog there, would be a lawsuit. It seemed that M&M had stayed on the plane and was already in Honolulu in quarantine. He flew straight to Hawaii from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Ed said if he had known that, he would have stayed on the plane himself. We walked around the airport for a while, looking at the different gift stores in the terminal. I sat down with Eric for a while. After several hours, Eric got up and headed to a terminal. I started to get up to get him, but I saw Ed walking back towards us. Ed asked Eric, "Where do you think you're going?" Eric looked at Ed and said, "To Hawaii." We ate at the terminal while we waited. Finally, we left LAX and headed to Hawaii. And that is the end of chapter 8. And I hope everybody has a happy hump day. And thank you for listening to my book. And I hope you buy it at Amazon.com. Search for Ann V. Brady in Amazon and you will find my book.